Good morning, everyone. My name is Frankie Rodolfi. I am the Director of Marketing for Climate Earth, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. We are pleased to have David Brodwin, President of New Voice of Business, as our speaker. David will discuss America's economic transformation and the business case for climate protection. The world's energy economy is transforming due to looming oil scarcity, security concerns in the Middle East, and risks of global warming. This once-in-a-generation shift offers major opportunities and poses risks for the business community. How should executives weigh in on policies that will affect their company's bottom line and market? David will describe key business trends behind energy transformation and climate protection and explain why an engaged, proactive stance makes good business sense even for skeptics. He will also offer practical steps that executives can take to make their voices heard. Our presentation this morning will take about 40 minutes, after which David and Climate Earth CEO Chris Erickson will take your questions. Now I'll hand the floor over to Chris, who will introduce David.
Okay, thank you, Frankie. As Frankie said, David is the president of New Voice of Business. It's an organization of business people committed to building a more just and sustainable economy. New Voice of Business works to inform, engage, and mobilize an influential network of business people to advocate for policy change at the national level and in California. Their focus this year is on energy policy that meets the challenge of global warming while promoting innovation, entrepreneurship, and economic growth. Right now, they are working actively to build support among business people for the Waxman-Markey bill. Before joining New Voice, David was the executive director at Rockridge Institute in Berkeley. Rockridge was the think tank where George Lakoff wrote Don't Think of an Elephant and several other acclaimed books on political communication. Before focusing on public policy, David worked in management and technology consulting. He was a partner in the media and entertainment practice of Accenture, and earlier was a director at Arthur D. Little, a global management and technology consulting firm. Over his career, he's worked with hundreds of clients in technology, industries, media, and entertainment, and more recently in the nonprofit sector. So now, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, David Brodwin.
Thank you, Chris. I suspect that most of you are here today because you're change agents, that you're here because you understand the issues of climate change and you want to do something about it. You recognize climate change for the life and death issue that it is, and that you want to help move your company, or perhaps your clients, to take steps in the right direction. And it's really important that we address this issue. The world needs you. Future generations are counting on you. This can't happen without your help. But it's hard work. Not everyone wants to listen. Perhaps sometimes you run into people that are hard to reach. Does that happen? Perhaps you run into people who are armed to the teeth with denier propaganda from Senator Inhofe's office. Has that happened to you? Perhaps you run into people who have a hard time accepting complex computer models about degrees of temperature change in decades of time, people who question how much trust we can really put into these models. And perhaps you run into people who think that it's pointless for the U.S. to act, regardless of the science, when China is building a new coal-fired power plant every week. How do we talk to people like this? At New Voice of Business, we talk to people like this all the time. Some of them are in Congress. Some of them are business people who live and work and have jobs in the districts of the representatives that we need to reach. I'd like to take part of the time this morning to share a little bit of the message that we offer to such people. I hope that you find it helpful in your work. I hope that what I share with you today might help you persuade just one more person to support the critical actions that we need to take. And then I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're doing about New Voice of Business and invite you to get involved. When we speak to skeptics, we start by taking 3 giant steps back away from the usual story about climate change, the story that focuses on the environment. This is not about the environment, and it's not about polar bears. It's about competition. The American automobile industry just got Priused. What does it mean to be Priused? It means to be overwhelmed by a competitor that anticipated a fundamental change, a change which could have been foreseen, should have been foreseen, but it wasn't. GM got Priused, Chrysler got Priused, And if we're not careful, if we're not smart, American business as a whole is about to get Priused. And America as a nation is about to get Priused. And it's important in speaking with many audiences that we make it clear that it is about business, it is about growth, it is about competitiveness, and it is, frankly, about patriotism. But the threat this time isn't from a car, and it isn't from drivetrain technology. The threat is from the most fundamental change in technology to hit since the invention of modern computing and telecommunications. A global energy revolution is getting underway, a revolution in how power is generated and how it's used. This revolution will change how business is done just as surely as the railroad did, the telephone did, and the computer did. There will be winners and losers in this revolution, just as in the ones that came before. Some companies will win, and some will lose. Some countries will win, and some will lose. But the most important point, and if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, please take this away. This revolution will happen whether you personally believe in global warming or whether you don't. It doesn't matter. The revolution will happen because technology makes it possible and because other countries around the world have an incentive to make it happen. 3 megatrends are driving this, as shown on the slide. Let's take a brief look. First, demand for energy is outstripping supply, and this is widely recognized around the world. Aggregate demand for energy is growing at about 2% a year, and it's growing much faster in the developing countries than in the developed. It's growing so fast that in India, for example, they can't even get the coal out of the ground fast enough to produce all the electricity that their people need. Unfortunately, and even setting aside for the moment the tremendous challenge of climate change, there just isn't enough energy to go around. In the best case, the forecast produced by the industry itself, oil supply is forecast to grow less than 1% compared to a demand growth rate of more than 2%, and the peak oil crowd forecasts a rapid decline starting real soon. That's the blue line shown on this chart. So any sensible country looks at this, and they see the shortages, they see the price spikes that are coming, and they say, we got to get out of the way of this juggernaut. To make matters worse, even the supply that we have, constrained as it is not safe. Setting aside the problems of working with OPEC, the oil infrastructure is filled with choke points that are easily attacked by terrorists. And this point has been well defended by Jim Woolsey and other people who have tremendous expertise and respect within the defense and security community. And since demand is so inflexible with respect to price, we should expect to get severe price spikes anytime we have a shortage in a strong economy. Last summer, when oil prices hit $150 a barrel, that's just a taste of what's going to be coming. And the security threat isn't limited to overseas. Even in the U.S., our energy infrastructure is quite fragile. You can see on this satellite photo taken during the blackout in the Northeast in August 2003 what happened when a tree brushed a power line. That black area in the circle is a part of the continent that should have been lit up but wasn't. This is from a tree. The Internet was originally invented so that our communication system wouldn't be vulnerable to this kind of single-point threat. But our power grid is decades behind in terms of robustness and security. Now, if just a tree can do this, think of what a single well-placed bomb can do.